All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Kano, the brutally honest gamer, and welcome to Gamer Section Live, where we go live and interview a lot of game developers and pick their brains about their upcoming games and stuff like that. So, without further ado, go ahead and introduce yourself, man.
Hey, thanks, Kay. So my name's Andrew. I'm a game developer, and I'm working on a game called Dolven. Um, we've been working on this game for probably about 3 or 4 months now, and I'm the lead developer and creative director.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely, it's dope, dope. So, uh, first question: what was the first game that you've played that made you fall in love with gaming?
Oh, wow. Well,
Got
that's
him.
that's a good question. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
question. Look, I'm going to say that in fact, the first thing that popped in my head when you asked that question was when I was
Mm-hmm.
probably about I would have been about 7 or 8 years old, and we had a IBM 386 computer. So that's showing
Mm-hmm.
my age. I got a few grey hairs here, so I'm a bit old. But we used to play a game called it's like a dungeon crawler,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all in ASCII. I can't remember the bloody name of it now. Rogue. It was called Rogue. That's right. It was an RPG,
Mm-hmm.
but it was using basically ASCII character, and it was like a dungeon crawler. You'd go around, you'd find monsters, and you'd attack those monsters, and it had a kind of a role based system and a dice sort of system to it. And that was fantastic. And the other one that just popped in my head was a game on the old Apple IIe called it was called Choplifter, and I think they still have uh, versions and incarnations of Choplifter these days. So they were my two kind of favorite games that I used to play over and over again when I was a kid.
Right, right, right. Very interesting. Very interesting. Like, you want to know my like one of my old favorite classic games that I used to play a lot of back in the day.
Which one's that?
There was this game on the PlayStation One called Brave Fencer Musashi. Right.
Okay. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that one. I did have a PlayStation 1, but yeah,
Hmm.
so long ago I can't remember.
Yeah. That game right there was a classic. That Legend of Mana was like two of my favorite games back in the day.
Awesome.
Classic games.
That's
Classic games. So,
that's great.
like,
Yeah.
how did you get into game development?
Well, that's a good question. So, um, all right. So I'm a software engineer by trade. I've worked in a number of professional roles which aren't game development, um,
Hmm.
and I I found them pretty pretty challenging, but um, after a while, not as challenging as perhaps I really wanted. And with game development, it is pretty much the pinnacle of challenge when you're creating any kind of software. It's
Hmm.
you know I've done a whole bunch of I've worked in business intelligence, I've worked in utilities, insurance, all these
Hmm.
places, and they have a kind of a standard architecture. With gaming, you've got a whole bunch of all those sort of different disciplines all put into one area. So you have physics, you have you have database storage, you have obviously the display, there's animations, there's AI. It's all of these different technologies and disciplines kind of put into one thing, and that's what makes it really interesting for me is the challenge of creating that, and the process of creating it
Hmm.
is the fun bit. Yeah, so that's kind of what got me into it, to be honest, is that challenge.
Interesting, interesting. So, like, are you currently a solo developer, or do you have like a team together? And if so, how did your team come together?
Yeah, so it's just a couple of us at the moment. So I'm doing the development by myself, but I have my wife actually. sort of works in the marketing side, so she helps out doing things like websites, and so we're building a website now for Dolven, and she does the social
Mhm.
media and things like that. And I also have a cousin who's a tester, so he's an automation tester, and so it's a very small little group, but we basically get together and sort of create based on that. So the company's name is called Covine. I haven't really publicized that yet, but we're going to have a website coming up pretty soon, which will have all that information.
Mhm.
So I'll be sure to let you guys know.
Okay, interesting, interesting. So you basically keeping uh the development team in the family.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of like a family thing. Interestingly, also, I have two daughters, and they often, when I'm developing stuff, they'll jump in and say, "Oh, you need to put something in here, some spidey crawlies or some birds or something." So one of my daughters came, and she's been helping me in the creative side, and my other daughter, she's all very good with stories, and so she's helped me,
Hmm.
formulate the story behind Dolven, which is morphed a little bit, but yeah, basically it's kind of very similar to what we came up with early on. So very lucky to have a lot of creative people in my family.
Okay, okay, that's very interesting. So like, okay, with the game Dolven, like, how did you come up with the name of the game Dolven Oathbreaker?
Okay, so Dolven is actually an old English word, meaning buried,
Hmm.
and so I've taken that name, and that's got to do with basically the sorry. There's my cat. My cat jumps up. She gets a bit she gets a bit jealous when I'm talking to people. Um, anyway, yeah. So we've got Dolven.
Hmm.
Dolven is buried, and now Oathbreaker. Oathbreaker is
Hmm.
actually it's basically a hint
Hmm.
around the storyline. So I won't give too much away about the story, but I guess it's once you get through the game, you realize why it was called Oathbreaker. So I don't want to
Hmm.
give away too many spoilers, but essentially that's the so it's really the kind of style of the game, and then also the story around it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool, cool, cool. So like, what engine are you actually using for this game?
Yeah, so we're using Unity for this one.
Hmm.
Um, I've I've had a look at a few other game engines, and actually a Java developer by trade,
Hmm.
and so I'm not as familiar with something like C++, which is what Unreal uses, but the transition from Java to C Sharp, which is
Hmm.
what Unity uses, was much easier, and so I sort of went with that. I also think that the the way that the Unity sort of environment is kind of all set up suits me, and so I chose that in the end. Really, to be honest, I could have probably gone with I probably could have gone with Unreal, but I just think I would have had to have learnt. There'd be quite a big learning curve, and so I just decided, well, try to go with something to start with. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that's very interesting with with how you formulating your engines and stuff like that,
Mm.
especially using Unity, because a lot of game developers that I interacted with, they actually are using the Unity engine. So that's
All
like
right.
one of the most popular engines to actually use. You know,
Mm. Well,
very
that's the other
popular.
thing. Yeah, you're right. And I think the great thing about that is that there's plenty of people out there, on forums and websites and things like that, where you might have a problem and you can just jump on the forum, and chances are 20 other people have had the same problem, and you can talk about how to fix it. And generally there's a kind of a lead as to how you go about fixing it. So
All
that
right.
does help a lot.
Right, right. I definitely feel that. Definitely feel that. So let's get back to the game. Let's talk about this
Yeah.
upcoming game that you're working on right now. So,
Yeah.
like, where does Dolven Oathbreaker take place? Where's the setting of the game?
Okay, so the setting is on a large island called the Decayed Isle,
Mm-hmm.
um, and basically it's made up of three empires. Um, the three empires are basically spread, divided across the map, and they all have essentially three kind of races within those empires. I won't give away too much, but this
Mm-hmm.
is the case. Um, one of the races is basically, well, I'll step back a little bit, right? Because you've got to have a bit of context before we get
Okay.
into the into the
Okay,
into
take
the
your time.
place.
Take your time.
Yeah, right. So if we step back, Dolven is basically a an RPG, so a turn-based RPG, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
like on it's a bit of a chessboard. It's sort of like on a chessboard,
Okay.
right? And it's also got a an integrated card deck builder, so you can create cards.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you have a set of cards that you can collect, and you can play those cards either on one of your players or on some pillars which are located on
Mm-hmm.
the map on the in the environment, right?
Right.
Um, Now, when you play it on one of the pillars, that's what we call a mercenary card. So it's kind of like an agent that'll sit there and give you a buff, right? So it might give you, a strength buff or a defense buff, or it might take energy off everyone or health off every person in the every character in the game. So it sort of gives you that sort of an ongoing effect on the pillar.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also take other cards and play them on particular characters. And so that might, again, um, put a defense shield around someone, or it might, buff them up so they can do electricity damage, or it might give them enchantment on their sword or something like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of setting. But there's three main cards, and those three main cards, if we circle back to the map, um, they correspond to the three areas. So you've got three suits. You've got strength, and you've got intellect, and you've got dexterity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each of the areas, you need to make sure you have the right cards to
Right.
be able to pass that area. So you need to build your deck. So say for example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going into uh, an area where the enemies have got a lot of agility. So it might be,
Mm-hmm.
a rogue or it might be a archer. You want to make sure you got a lot of strength cards, because strength is kind of the opposite to agility. Um, and so that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the strategy behind it, and how the game kind of plays in those areas. Yeah. So it's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but it's very deep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No problem. And you also answered one of my questions too. My
Oh,
other
did I?
questions I had. Uh-huh.
Sorry,
It's no problem.
jumping
That's
ahead.
cool though. That's cool. Because nah, no, you don't have to apologize, man. It's good, man. Because people will want to know this type of game anyway. So, like,
Yeah.
okay. So I recently seen on Twitter that you introduced like a snow area in the game. So tell us a little bit
Mm.
about the snow area in the game.
Yeah. So, um, interestingly enough, there's different biomes. Okay, so we've got a few different biomes in that area. The snow one in
Mm-hmm.
particular is going to be in the strength kind of area that I spoke about a bit earlier. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's going to have it's actually going to have a lot of warrior classes. So you would have seen on that on Twitter, when I posted on Twitter, there was dwarves. Now they've got a lot of strength. They've got a big axe, and they come a belcher. So you got to make sure you have um, a lot of magic available, or
Mm-hmm.
agility, so that you can use that against that strength aspect. But the snow area, like every other area in Dolven, is actually procedurally generated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we're using we're using a framework which is called Dungeon Architect,
Hmm.
and it's actually available on Unity. It's a great little framework, but what it allows you to do is to spawn um, basically a dungeon, as the
Right,
name
right.
sort of suggests. Um, and so with Dolven, I don't know if you've ever played a game called Binding of Isaac. Have you heard of that before?
I might not hadn't played it, but I heard of the name.
You heard of it? So yeah, with Binding of Isaac, it's essentially a whole bunch of different rooms, and it's all automated. There goes my cat again. It's it's
Hmm.
all automated, right? And so
Hmm.
you can, you for each room there's a different set of props within the room. There's, the look and feel of it. You would have seen the snow coming down in that environment. Um, and it's all basically, you go through each room, and each room's got different enemies, and it slowly progressively gets harder and harder until you get to the end boss within the dungeon, and that would complete that one sort of dungeon within one of the empires. So there'll be multiple dungeons within each empire. Yeah.
Okay, okay. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So, like,
Mm.
what gave you the idea to make this game a turn-based RPG using the cards?
Yeah, good question. So I'm a massive fan of the old school RPG games like Baldur's Gate. Uh, what else? I loved a game which not many people may have heard of before called The Temple of Elemental Evil.
Hmm.
Um, and then also more recent ones like Divinity Original Sin, where
Hmm.
basically you kind of, and the thing I loved about it was building up your character,
Hmm.
and getting the gear and adding the gear to your character, and then also the battles. Like I loved how you could strategically decide, what's the next move I'm going to make. Am I going to give this guy a buff so that he doesn't get smashed by another guy?
Hmm.
Am I going to, sacrifice one of my players so that I can keep the other ones alive. I love that sort of strategic, slow kind of paced aspect to it. And then also, recently I've been playing a few games. So I play. You've probably heard of Elder Scrolls Online before.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I do.
you heard of that one? So Elder Scrolls Online, they released not long ago a card game in there,
Hmm.
and called Tribute. And so I've, I ended up I just log on to ESO and just start playing that. I was completely like, I didn't even want to hear about the rest of the game. I just wanted to play the card game, and
Hmm.
so I really enjoyed that. And then I thought, oh well, I did play a game called Hearthstone as well, which is from Blizzard. For a while, and now recently I've been playing a game on my phone called Marvel Snap, which I was playing just before I jumped on this interview, and I thought, well, why not combine both of those two things? The one that sort of RPG turn-based system and a
Hmm.
card deck builder, and that's where we got to. And I guess the other thing is that, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I love that aspect of building up your character, and so the game itself will have gear that you can slot in for each of your characters, and a rich storyline as well. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of aspects to it that I personally really want to play, and I think that's the key. Is I thought of this and I thought, well, it's actually a game I want to play,
Hmm.
um, and in terms of the actual development process. This is the third time I've written um, the game. So the first time I wrote the game, it was actually an RPG. So a third person where you're kind of running around a world, and it's multiplayer, and you can get people to jump in, and you can fight battles and things like that. We didn't go with that one because it just felt like another one of those games that you see hundreds of, on Steam these days. Just the typical kind of action RPG. I would have had to compete with a lot of big studios to release a game like that.
Right, right.
So that was the first one, and I built it on Unity's ML API, which is their first incarnation of the multiplayer system. And I found a lot of bugs, and so I thought, all right, I've got to rewrite this and change it. So I actually moved to another framework called Fishnet, I think it's called. Yeah, Fishnet. And so I basically rewrote the whole game, because when you're writing a multiplayer game, the multiplayer aspect,
Mm-hmm.
you got to kind of keep it, it's integrated into everything within the game. And so if you want to rip that out and put a new multiplayer system in, you almost have to rewrite
Mm-hmm.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and so in the end, I rewrote it with this new system, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work. It got to the point where it was actually way too big for our little studio. And so this is the third one. It's not multiplayer, but I've left room for it to be multiplayer. So hopefully, once we release this first incarnation of it, the first
Mm-hmm.
version, and it catches on, then after that we'll look at making a multiplayer aspect to it.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So let me ask you this: like, okay, like within this game, like, what are the other areas can you actually explore in the game?
Okay. Um, so we kind of mentioned the map already.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that there's going to be a town area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the town area, that's where you'll do your main sort of questing and trading aspect to it. All right. So basically, you can think of it kind of a bit like Diablo. If you've played Diablo before, you
Oh
go out.
yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
go through a dungeon, you fight stuff, then you go back to a town, and in that town, you can visit the blacksmith. You can visit quest NPCs, and they'll also be within some of the dungeons. But um, and and you can sort of you can the other aspect is that you can create food and buffs and things within the town, so that you can use those later on. You can also visit the card dealer, so the card dealer will give you new cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other aspect is that you'll be able to go into an area where you can you can rearrange your cards. So the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the cards themselves can also be upgraded, and so they have gem slots on them. um, and you'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
buy gems, create gems, and then add those to your cards. And when you play those cards on a pillar, if you've got other
Mm-hmm.
cards that are sort of matching, then those gems will also have an effect on what happens. So, for example, if you've got two fire gems, then it would double the potency of that fire spell. Um, yeah, and then basically when you play a card, you gain
Yeah.
these things called runes, and those runes can be spent in town to again, enhance your characters or your cards. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds very interesting. So, like, with the level up system, like, tell us, like, kind of explain to us about how you level up and what ways can you level up in the game.
Okay. So that bit's still under development,
Mm-hmm.
but the initial thought is basically, um, as you're leveling up, there's a number of things that happen, right? So number
Mm-hmm.
one is that you obviously face more difficult opponents throughout the game, right? And so you've got to make sure that you have the gear to be able to face those opponents.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have basic attributes, so things like strength, agility, and intellect,
Mm-hmm.
and the gear that you put on will also enhance those attributes as well as you're
Okay.
leveling up. The other thing that will happen is that when you're leveling up, you'll be able to unlock new cards. So by beating bosses, by get going through more dungeons, you'll get more experience. We're not sure
Mm-hmm.
exactly what that experience is going to look like yet. It might be
Okay.
a leveling system. It might be just a point system. But essentially, you'll be able to unlock more and more powerful cards that then you can use to progress further in the game. Yeah,
Okay, okay. Very, very interesting. Very, very
yeah,
interesting.
it's
I can't.
exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what the leveling system will be like in this game. It sounds like it'll be very unique in its own way.
I think so. I think so.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, like, whenever the game does release, like, will there be any DLC content for this game in the future?
I think that's probably likely,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll come in the form of probably new areas and new dungeons to start with.
Mm-hmm.
As I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, really like to explore a couple of things. I'd like to explore the possibility of making it multiplayer,
Mm-hmm.
at least in some aspect. Yeah, maybe it's a new scene that you go into and you're able to play a sort of a ranking system against other players, because I think that would be really exciting. I think one of the things that I've learnt in my 40 odd years of gaming is that playing games with other people is what makes it a memorable experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd really like to be able to add that at some point. It's just right at the moment to be able to do that would be too much, I think, for our studio. Way too much scope, and we probably would never finish it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but then we have had a few discussions around the possibility of adding, maybe a new empire on top of it, um,
Mm-hmm.
or new dungeons, and that could be likely in the future. But it's really going to depend on the feedback we get from the first release. If people want to see more of that, then that's what we're going to do. If
Okay.
people are crying out for multiplayer, that's what we're going to do. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. I feel that. I feel that. So, next question. This is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Okay.
Okay. So, like, why should people want to play this game day one?
Why should they want to play this game day one? I'm going to say because it's going to be fun. All right, that's going to be the key thing. Is that
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a rich storyline around it.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna be engrossed in that storyline. I
Mm-hmm.
would I would even like to, if I get a chance, talk a little bit about that storyline. Maybe not to give too much away, but
Yeah, let's speak on it.
okay. So it basically starts out with a blacksmith. Okay, now this blacksmith,
Mm-hmm.
he's done quite well for himself. He has sold a lot of weapons and armor, and so one day he's walking along with his family, and he gets ambushed. And if you look on the Twitter, on the Twitter post that I put up, I put a little cut scene in there, which sort of gives you a bit of a view of this story.
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
kind of seen that. I seen that.
yeah, yeah. So this blacksmith's walking along. He's got a big crate full of money.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens after that is that he actually gets attacked by bandits, and those
Mm-hmm.
bandits, they actually murder his daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a terrible thing. And so he's obviously very distraught about that. And then you come
Mm-hmm.
along, and you are actually you're a band of mercenaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he hires you to try and attack these bandits for revenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, But in the meantime, a necromancer comes along. So a necromancer comes along to the blacksmith and says, "Hey, um, I noticed that the dialogue's going to be different to the way I'm saying it here, but
Mm-hmm.
he's going to say, hey, blacksmith, I noticed your daughter has died. I can bring her back to life, but
Right, right.
you've got to pay a price for it." And so
Mm-hmm.
he accepts the price, and that's where I'm going to stop the story, because after that I'll be giving away too much.
That's you just basically hit them with a to be continued.
That's right.
Definitely
Yes.
feel that. Definitely feel that. So, like, when will Dolven Oathbreaker release, and what platforms will it be on?
Okay. So at the moment, we're gonna go. I'm targeting a Q2 next year release,
Mm-hmm.
so Q2 23, hopefully around June. Now that's a very tentative date, because
Mm-hmm.
it's obviously, when you create a game, you have targets. You generally don't hit them, but that's what I'm going to try and aim for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sorry, what was the second question?
And I was asking like, what platforms will it be
Oh,
on?
yeah, the platforms. So at the moment, it's just going to be PC to start with,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll be the first release. Being Unity, obviously there's opportunity to move to different platforms, and
Mm-hmm.
the way that I've written the interface, so the way you drag and drop cards, the way you click on things, can all
Mm-hmm.
be done with one click, and so there is a chance that later on we could actually put it on mobile, or also, tablet. And the other thing that I really want to do, just as a personal kind of goal of mine, is to be able to put it on Linux, because I think that that would be really interesting. I love the Linux ecosystem, and if I get a
Mm-hmm.
chance to do that, then I'll do a port to Linux as well. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So you right now the goal is to get it through all the PC platforms first, and down the road it might down the road come to consoles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it could be possible to go to consoles. I'm not sure if the interface will work. I'll have
Mm-hmm.
to look at existing games, although I did play a fair bit of Divinity, on the console. So, maybe I can get a few ideas from those guys on how they went about, doing that. So, yeah, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly possible. The great thing about Unity, obviously, is that you can sort of port relatively easily.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking at all those options, but I think first up, let's go for PC. It's probably the biggest market at the moment, and
Okay,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
obviously what we want to target. So yeah.
Okay, most definitely, most definitely. So like last question. Where can
Okay.
they find you at on social media?
Yeah. So it's at Dolven_game. That's the place to go to at the moment. That's our central sort of communications area. As I said, we are going to be releasing a website, and it's going to be called dolvengame.com.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'll be promoting all of that on Twitter. So jump on Twitter at Dolven_game, and look, send me a note if any of your watchers have questions, or just interested in even the development process.
Mm-hmm.
Jump on there, and I'm more than happy to have a chat. So yeah.
Okay, okay. Most definitely. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This has been another fantastic interview. Make sure y'all go ahead and support this game. This game is going to be available sometime in 2023. Support the game. The link will be in the description where y'all can go harass them about the game. and, and thank y'all for joining in. You know what I'm saying? And to the people that will watch it later on. So thank y'all and have a good day. So we out. Peace.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show.